Chapter 3. Overcoming the Bullies. My mother would cry every time she received a letter from me. She wasn't educated like my dad was. But she was closer to me than he ever could be. I remember how concerned she was when I had gone for a full medical checkup, a prerequisite once you have been selected at the Lucknow Sports Hostel. They had made a record of even the tiniest of details, like the number of marks and moles on my body. They did it so that later if something were to happen to me, they would have my entire medical history. However, she had no clue about this. For her, this was her son being put through some kind of ordeal. My mother is Himachali. There are two kinds of Punjabis, one from Pakistan and the other from the Indian side. The ones from the Pakistani side are hardcore Punjabis, and their dialect is quite different from the Hindi-fused Punjabi spoken on this side of the border. At my home, everyone speaks the Pindwali, Pakistani, Punjabi. In fact, initially, Priyanka found my mother's language very confusing. I used to ask her to keep me on speaker whenever they spoke on the phone to help her out. But she has improved a lot now. My mother tongue is Himachali. But even in Himachal, they speak in Punjabi. And since most of us have been born and brought up in Muradnagar, we hardly knew any Himachali and were more used to conversing in Punjabi. My mother has always been the sweetest person I know. She is also very sensitive, especially when it comes to me, the baby of the house. When I was in hostel, she missed me a lot. Initially, I would write to my parents very regularly. After a point, though, Dad asked me to stop addressing letters to her. I continued writing, but I would skip the emotional parts to prevent her from crying. Mom found it difficult to believe that I hardly addressed her in my letters. She would keep asking Dad about it until he himself started writing the letters to keep her happy. For a long time, she didn't find out anything about what I'd been through at the hostel or how I'd been treated. Then, one day, she found my personal diary lying around and started going through some of the incidents I had described. She was completely heartbroken and shattered. She basically felt helpless that she hadn't been there for me, that she couldn't protect me from all that evil and the hardships that her little boy had to endure far away from home. It was an important lesson for me. How much of your bad experiences in life should you share with your parents or even your partner? It's a tricky one. In life, we often hide these things from them in order to prevent them from getting hurt. But eventually, they might end up getting hurt even more if they find out the truth by themselves. Maybe the secret is to realize that your pain is their pain too, and that it's best to share it. It was a habit of mine back then to maintain a diary. My friends advised me to do so, and hence I started maintaining a journal of sorts, in which I would jot down my experiences daily. I wrote in Hindi everything that happened through the course of the day, the things I learned, the things I had to face, and the like. And this actually helped me keep busy. Most of my focus was on the game, especially on the batting techniques I had used, learned or been praised for. And then it just so happened that while writing those thoughts down, I would also add some bits about what I had eaten, having fun with my friends and stuff of that kind. This became a part of my routine for my entire first year in college. Slowly, I also started writing about the not-so-good parts, about being away from home and living in a hostel. As the youngest in the family, I always received a lot of care from everyone. It isn't easy for any kid that age to be away for so long. And it wasn't just me. A lot of kids at our hostel had come out of their homes and were staying away from their families for the first time, which was a big adjustment in itself. And then, to have your seniors treat you that badly was just unforgivable. Some couldn't handle the ragging, it got too much for them, coupled with the homesickness. And I was always the prime target. Seniors would especially target the juniors who were good at studies and sports, as I was. They would keep assigning work to me or try various other tricks just to annoy me. But I always kept my cool. I had no other choice. We had to prepare the pitches and put up the wickets on the field in the morning, after which the juniors also had to water the fields and the gardens around. In the afternoon, the juniors had to bunk classes to go set up the pitch and the wicket for the evening sessions. If for some reason the pitch wasn't ready on time, the seniors would punish us, making us stand for hours in the field with hands in the air, or making us crouch and hop around like a chicken. I was always the main victim of all this ragging, which was prevalent in those days. Owing to my family background, I was really good in academics. And I also knew my game very well. Thus, the teachers and coaches always liked me. Moreover, I used to play well in school, so no one could ever point a finger at me regarding my cricket. Ragging happens in every school, but it varies from place to place. In some places, it is done just for fun, while in other places it gets very serious, with the freshers even getting beaten up. If you ask me, ragging should obviously be banned, especially at hostels in places like Uttar Pradesh, UP, where the general environment in itself is aggressive. Youngsters who go there to play sports face similar challenges. Senior players get juniors to do their chores and subject them to other forms of ragging, pouring water over them and stuff like that. All this is common in hostels, given that the under 14, under 16 and even under 19 players are very young, and there is this constant sense of competition that hovers over the heads of the seniors whenever these players come in. If one of the juniors got beaten up or something, that was when the newcomers took it up as a challenge and began to answer back. Fighting it out with your own group was the only way to survive. You had to show them that you were there to study and play. I come from a family that is really calm and quiet and believes in resolving fights through words, not actions. And this has really helped me. Back when I first arrived in the hostel, I had never seen anyone fight. So, coming from such a background and adjusting to the new normal was definitely a challenge. The key was to maintain solidarity among your peers. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I remember my first day at the hostel. There were 15 kids, including me, who had gone through the selection round. We then had to go through medical tests, physical tests, followed by flexibility and eye tests. Thus, 1 week was spent in all this, and those who failed were replaced. Then we met the principal, who told us what all was expected of us. From among those who were at the hostel, only 2 or 3 would be selected for playing with the hostel team ultimately. Neeraj, who went on to become one of my closest friends, and a few other boys joined our gang. Our batch had kids from various backgrounds and different parts of the state. The athletics guys generally came from Pratapgarh, Rai Bareli, Gorakhpur and Azamgarh. Neeraj and I were from neighboring towns, half an hour apart. As kids, we had met at local tournaments. So our getting selected for the hostel at the same time was just meant to be. There were 3 of us from our region. The third member of that group, a Sikh youth, has passed away unfortunately. Cricket was everything to me. While playing, I learnt a lot about life in general. And for me, my game was of the utmost importance, even though most of my family members were highly educated, including both my brothers, who had done higher studies and had a couple of degrees. One of them had started tutoring students. My dad always used to tell me that no matter how important the game was to me, I needed to keep studying as far as I could. And things got real when we had to take a loan to send me to sports college. He was hell-bent that I continue my education, whereas I was taking admission in the college primarily due to my cricketing potential. Even mom would emphasize the importance of studying and learning new things. That was why I completed my BA graduation from Lucknow University. I knew they wouldn't give me full permission to play till I finished a basic level of education. Deependra Pandey and I were the only 2 who had passed from our batch. I knew that for all my success as a cricketer, my parents would not have been pleased if I'd ignored my education. I'm so thankful to them for that. You don't often realize the importance of education as a cricketer till you have retired. Before going to the hostel, from Muradnagar to Ghaziabad was the maximum distance I had travelled by myself. So, moving to a completely different city for the sake of cricket was quite an important decision in my life. The initial months were great since I was getting to play every day. But eventually, as the days passed and the uglier side of the hostel life started to emerge, things changed. Day in and day out, I had to bear the ragging as well as complete my chores while sticking to a particular schedule. It all became really challenging. Even when you are playing, you often tend to get lonely at such places. Especially on Fridays, when most of the students would leave for their homes and I would be the only one staying back since it took a 2-day train journey for me to visit home. They would then return with home-cooked food, and that would upset me. Eventually, I started traveling home as well, using the train passes that a few of my friends, who were from Banaras, had got for themselves. The train tickets were expensive. At the hostel, you learnt about the different regions of UP through the people you met there. I was born in UP. All my documents showed that I was from there. However, my father was from Kashmir and mother from Himachal. When I joined the hostel, I had slightly brownish hair and was really fair. My game was already developing nicely, and I was good at studies. As Neeraj likes to say, I went there as a mini package. The problem was that a lot of students there came from the Up Bihar border areas. Their mindset was extremely different from mine. Most of them, I think, were driven by a jealousy factor and had deep-rooted insecurities. In their eyes, perhaps, I was an outsider. Hostel life consists of routines and more routines. At some level, it's tough to not get institutionalized and resist having your life embedded into those patterns. We had a pretty strict schedule at the hostel, one that we all had to follow religiously. For me, it went like this. Wake up, get ragged, sing the national anthem, practice, have breakfast, go for the classes, lunch, practice again and get ragged. And so it would continue. That was my routine. Our principal would meet us at the morning assembly every day at 6 a.m. Before that, the hostel siren would ring at 4 a.m. to wake us all up. The accommodation for all students on campus was divided based on age groups and also on the basis of different sports. Those who were there for football and hockey would be on some floor, while the athletics gang would be on another. We, the cricket group, were on the 4th floor. There would be tea for us on the ground floor every morning. It wasn't just the hostel routines that we had to follow diligently, there were also those laid down by the seniors. Every morning, regardless of whether it was raining or freezing cold, the seniors would keep all their mugs under my bed, with orders that they needed the tea to be delivered to their rooms personally by me, before I could get a cup for myself. I was 11 or 12, and I would go up and down the stairs a number of times to make sure that all of them had received their cups of tea before 4:30 a.m. If the tea wasn't there on time, they would rag me again or beat me up, at times with hockey sticks. Post-breakfast, we would have our first practice session of the day, which would be followed by school. We would then return to our rooms for a couple of hours before setting out for the evening session of cricket practice. The break in between was for us to rest or finish our homework or just sit and study. But I wouldn't get much time to do any of that. The seniors would throw all their dirty clothes either on my bed or next to it in our dorm. It was my responsibility, they had decided, to get their laundry done every day. And like with everything else to do with them, I had no choice but to get it done. Our evening practice would finish around 7th July 19:30 p.m. We had to walk to the ground, which was on campus. During that time, we would be given 1 glass of milk and 1 banana every evening to nourish ourselves with. The seniors would go and grab their share at the very beginning, while we would usually be late since there was a lot to wrap up and carry back from the field. That was our job too. I especially had a lot to do after the practice sessions, from clearing up to even taking the nets down. By that time I would get done, the seniors would have not only finished most of the milk but also contaminated whatever little was left, using grass, dead insects, mud or whatever they got their hands on. Basically, I then had to choose between either doing something about it or going hungry. That was when I started making sure I always filtered the milk using a muslin cloth before drinking the few milliliters left. We would sit at the end of the table during both meals of the day. The chapati or rotis or whatever else would be served beginning from the other end, the head of the table. First the coaches, then the seniors and then us, the juniors. That was the sequence. So, we would usually get the most rotis from the bottom of the pile. We couldn't complain about all that. We didn't have nutritionists at the Lucknow Sports Hostel, nor was there any great emphasis on providing high-level nutrition. Our meals were somewhat like this. They would serve tea at 4 in the morning, then we would get breakfast comprising sprouts, milk, bread, eggs. Lunch would be North Indian food. Around evening, we would be given milk and banana, and dinner would be chapati and dal or some non-veg dish. The Parle-G biscuits were definitely a lifesaver for us at that time, but we had to be careful while holding on to them. I wasn't the first or the only kid to be subjected to that level of ragging at the hostel. But I was certainly the favorite to be picked on. To an extent, I understood where the seniors' animosity towards me came from. I was the kid on the first bench. I was good at studies. My reputation as a cricketer was growing fast. The professors and teachers liked me. My name was always doing the rounds owing to some innings I'd played or some catch I'd taken. You have to understand the dynamics of a sports hostel to get an idea of why I was targeted. Most of those in the athletics group came there with one major goal: to get a government job through the sports quota. And then there was me, getting all this attention from not just the cricket coaches, but also from everyone else in general. For them, I was a threat. This was their future on the line. Their livelihood and, in most cases, their families depended on their success. They saw me as a major obstacle, one that had to be eliminated. In addition, I was the one who never answered back, no matter how much they ragged me. I would get frustrated, and that would show in my practice and game. This would annoy the seniors further, since they couldn't pick on me there. On the field, they were often no match for me. They would otherwise just find reasons to pick on me. On the odd day, I would have icy cold water splashed on my face at 3:30 a.m. This wasn't punishment. This was torture. Then there were other small things they would keep ragging me for, like being late for dinner or not having watered the garden, etc. You may be wondering why none of the professors or teachers did anything about this. But back then, ragging wasn't considered a major issue. All these incidents easily went unnoticed. For many, it wasn't a big deal. At times, it happened very much in front of their eyes, when, for instance, the seniors would unnecessarily make us mow the lawn or cut the grass on the coldest of winter nights. Nobody did anything about it. Nor did we complain to anyone. That would only have meant putting ourselves in greater peril. When the seniors couldn't find a way of torturing us, they gave us really physically challenging tasks and would then punish us on the grounds that we hadn't done a satisfactory job. The punishments could range from standing for hours while holding a very heavy piece of wood over your head or murgabanna, doing sit-ups while imitating a chicken, after which we would still get beaten up with hockey sticks. Initially, I had thought that giving it back was the best way, but then I realized there was no point in doing that. It was a very vital lesson for me in life. The best way to deal with a bully often is not to give it back to him or her in their style, but to do it your own way. For me, it meant directing my aggression towards the game and giving it back to the seniors through my game on the field. I didn't believe that going around discussing my mindset with my peers was the way out. Instead, I sweated it out more than anyone else on the field during our practice sessions or even otherwise. I would finish a 100-meter sprint in 12 to 13 seconds. Whenever I was free, I would go out on the field and start exercising and running even in the afternoon, when it would be blazing hot, with the sun right over one's head. I never cried or broke down. We couldn't tell our parents about what was going on either. We anyway couldn't talk to them a lot since the PCO, public phone, was really far from the hostel. And we had to take permission from the seniors to go and make calls, which was allowed only on weekends. We wouldn't always get our parents on the phone, so we often had to speak to the neighbors instead. Moreover, the seniors would be lurking outside the PCO, monitoring and eavesdropping, and then ragging us based on that later. We couldn't hint at anything or even be suspected of having slipped a word about the ragging to anyone outside. There were dire consequences for that. At times, I could see that Neeraj and a couple of my other friends wanted to help. But the thing was that if one of us spoke up, the entire batch would get beaten up. It was clear that the seniors wanted me out of the way. To keep it subtle, they would go around ragging and beating up the other boys in my group too, just so their objective didn't seem too obvious. They were a collective front who were out to get me. My group was united too, but mostly we were helpless and unable to stand up to those bullies. On one occasion, though, I couldn't hold myself back and ended up retaliating in physical fashion. It was probably one of the worst incidents during my time at the hostel. It happened when we were traveling for a tournament to Agra by train. Often during an overnight journey, we would be sitting wearing our leg guards and all our gear to protect us from the cold. On that occasion, there would be some confusion with the tickets. So a number of us didn't have seats. We had to make do with whatever space we got on the floor near the door to sleep. The seniors would torment us even there by throwing their slippers and shoes at us the moment the lights went off. That night, there was a bit of a squabble between me and a couple of bigger boys about them claiming that I was intruding into their space. They said they didn't have enough space to stretch their legs because of me. Then, as soon as the lights went out, one of them, this really big boy, sat on me and started urinating on my face. I just lost it completely. I pushed him off violently and landed a punch on his face. It almost knocked him off the train. That was the first and only time I reacted in this fashion. I was just 13 at that time. Looking back, I think I could have gone about it differently. But in that moment, I saw no other choice but to express my disgust and displeasure in the most extreme fashion. I also had to be careful. Some of those athletics guys were known to sleep with a revolver or gun next to them. In a way, though, I am glad I stood up to that fellow. There were some in our group who got severely affected by everything they had experienced at the hostel. There was a boy called Kunal Chatterjee, who was so shaken by it all that he threatened to jump off the 4th floor balcony. Neeraj and I had to pull him back. We asked him to calm down and told him that we would protect him. Things went that bad at times. It was ironic how, despite having suffered most at the hands of the seniors, I had to be the one counseling the members of my group and saving them from taking any drastic steps. I would talk to them and ask them to be calm and not pay any attention to the seniors and their antics. I had to set an example for the other juniors. I did so on the field as well. I started performing really well. I was a little boy standing up to the big fast bowlers, who were generally part of the bullying group. I hit them for boundaries and sixes and made them look not so impressive in the nets. It eventually transformed their behavior towards me, to the extent that they even started buttering me up once they realized that I had the potential to rise and shine. But that was to happen much later. As mentally strong as I thought I was, even my nerves couldn't handle all that stress after a point. I broke down. I couldn't do it anymore. I had to leave. And I did. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. By class 9, the ragging had reached an extreme level for me. I remember going to one of my friends, Vikas Paliwal, and asking him to help me pack since I was going home. I had told nobody else except Neeraj. But even they didn't know my plan was to leave and never come back. We were just approaching our Diwali vacation at that point. I made up a story about how there was this important function coming up in the family, something to do with my sister, and that I needed a longer break than usual because I had to attend it. You see, winter was approaching then, which meant things would get worse. I had been using the same unwashed quilt for the past 4 years, the one on which seniors had spat pan masala. There had also been this incident. A senior had called me some name and cussed me for being from the Merit area. I didn't get what he was saying, so I said, "I am sorry, I can't understand what you are labeling me as." I got beaten up for that, and the entire class got punished by them. The atmosphere had become too wild. I couldn't stand it anymore. When the family function excuse didn't work, I tried feigning an illness. I said I wasn't doing too well, and that I would have to go home a few days before the vacations officially began. However, in a match that we played soon after, I took a brilliant catch dismissing one of the seniors. That's when the coach called me and asked me why I was lying about my health when I was actually in such great shape and taking remarkable catches. I just tried to underplay the thing and said it was no big deal. I still insisted that I wanted to go home since I wasn't being able to concentrate there. But the coach kept rejecting my request to leave. So I paid one of my seniors to drop me till a certain point and took off by myself. The only person I had told later was Neeraj. I had given him my number, asking him to inform me if things went south at the hostel. However, he couldn't do that. As he was beaten up by the seniors because of me, they were scared that my disappearance would get them into trouble. This was how I had planned and executed my escape. I had packed everything and made a run for it. Our sports college was on the outskirts of the city. The highway there was narrow and flanked by forests. So whenever we had to visit the city to get our sports equipment, we had to hitchhike our way there. Rarely did we get lucky and catch a bus. On the day of my escape, I hailed a truck and the driver let me in. But a few minutes later, I was alarmed by his demeanor and the fact that he refused to stop in Merit. Here was this chikna ladka all by himself, with 3 grown men inside a truck. I somehow managed to chuck my bags out at a toll booth and jump out, and then I just kept running. Luckily, they didn't make any attempt to follow me. I then walked to the closest railway station and found a train that dropped me off in Muradnagar. It was still a 5 kilometers walk home, but I wasn't complaining. I finally felt safe. Of course, I hadn't informed my parents that I was coming back for good. They were a little surprised to see me. When Mom saw all my stuff, she inquired about it, and I just told her that I was back on a holiday and thought I could get a few extra clothes for the upcoming winter. It was only after a good 10 to 20 days that they started asking me when I was returning to the hostel. I would not say anything. When they received a letter from the hostel informing them that I had been absconding, I told them the truth about hostel life. Mom became emotional. Both she and my sister decided that I was not returning. I couldn't go out of my house too. I was embarrassed and worried about what people would think of me and about the consequences it would have on my family. My father was very upset with me. He had taken a loan to send me to the hostel. They had made sacrifices to make sure that my dream came true. And here I was, back home, having lied to the hostel authorities. My father was insistent that I return to the hostel. His point was, you can't run away from troubles in life. You have to stand up and face these challenges head-on. The letter my parents received from the college said that since they had spent so much money in grooming me, my family had to repay them some amount if I wasn't going back to represent them. That's when my big brother Dinesh and my dad tried convincing me to go back. The turning point was when SP Krishnan sir, my cricket coach, himself came all the way to our place to speak to my parents and explain the whole scenario to them. When Krishnan sir heard about everything I had been through, he too was very shocked and upset. He assured my parents and me that I would never have to face anything of that nature ever again, and that he would see to it that I was safe. It also opened his eyes towards all the terrible things the seniors were doing to us. My elder brother was very supportive. He came to drop me at the hostel. Neeraj and everyone else was so happy to see me. I hadn't done it probably the way I should have, but fortunately, I had made a statement. It changed not only my life at the hostel but also the way bullying and ragging was looked at by the officials there. They finally acknowledged it as a major issue, if not an offense, and that they needed to come down heavily on the offenders. Once, Krishnan sir went back after meeting my family and hearing my story. The hostel authorities put in place an investigation team to check who had done what in terms of the ragging complaints. But of course, no one volunteered to speak up against the seniors, and thus no one got punished. However, the teachers were now aware of what the seniors had been up to and became a lot more vigilant. When I returned to the hostel, things began improving dramatically. It was a much-needed relief. The authorities had realized that talented kids shouldn't be in a position where they wanted to leave because of the ragging. The college was supposed to train and groom them. They understood that if the ragging wasn't stopped, there was no way that India would make any progress in terms of sports at least. The recent developments had made a massive difference to me too. I became stronger and freer. My determination to prove everyone wrong or right, depending on which side of the fence they sat, only grew. I decided that I wouldn't say a word against whatever people did, but my bat would speak for me on the field. I never lost my smile either. Neeraj often laments about how difficult it is to find out exactly how I'm feeling at any given moment. He says that I always have a cheeky expression on my face, creating a certain sense of mystery, so that one never knows what I am thinking. While I don't do it intentionally, I'm glad that at least my closest friends think I am some sort of an enigma. It was during that period of transformation that the seniors' attitude towards me also changed enormously. Some did it just out of the fear of being pulled up as those responsible for the ragging. But for many, it was more about the realization that I was there simply to achieve my goal of representing the nation. I could sense that their admiration was giving way to respect as I continued to perform better on the field. The culmination of that turnaround for me at the hostel was my leading the team of juniors to victory over the same seniors. I was the best performer of the match. That really meant for me that the tide had turned for good. Upon rejoining the hostel, I no longer needed a diary, since I had come back stronger. I think that old diary is still there at my parents' place somewhere. The seniors about whom I had written in the diary, the ones who used to rag me, soon started playing under my captaincy. Not that it mattered to me. On the field, my key focus was my performance. I never let anything distract me from that objective. The most pleasing outcome of it all, my bad experiences at the hostel followed by my abandoning the ship, was how the seniors' attitude towards the juniors changed in general. People became a lot more aware of the long-lasting impact of ragging on the victims. I could sense that the future batches of seniors, including Neeraj and my other friends, were so much more welcoming of the newbies. The Lucknow Sports Hostel became a place where kids came to play sports, get a decent education and pursue their goals, without the fear of ill-treatment and abuse that we had to endure. *****. As I mentioned earlier, our college was located in a secluded area. We hardly had any source of entertainment except the radio. We would only step out to buy the basic necessities. There was a tea shack nearby, where we went to update ourselves about the news and all that was happening around. Otherwise, there wasn't much to be done there. We didn't have any TVs in rooms. Within the hostel, there was one TV room, but the seniors mostly used that. Very rarely would we all get to watch a cricket match together. There was one senior named Mrityunjay Tripathi, who played in the Under-19 World Cup in 2000. He was from Yuvraj Singh's batch. I remember having got the chance to watch the finals in the TV room, since Tripathi was a part of our college. He even took a wicket in that final, which was played against Sri Lanka in Colombo. That was the only time all of us sat together in the TV room and watched the same channel. In our group, we always had fun when we were together. And I would invariably be leading the charge. We would listen to the radio together and sing along with songs playing on it. I always had an interest in singing, and Neeraj and others had to put up with me humming away in their ears all the time. We hardly knew anything about the world outside the hostel at that time. It was very different from today's generation. That was a way more innocent era. The only time we got to interact with the rest of the world was during the Holi and Diwali holidays. That was when we would get to see trains, roads, cars and even girls. Apart from the radio and the TV room, the only other source of entertainment we had was the movie theater nearby. Occasionally, we would sneak out and go watch a movie on Saturday nights. We did get caught a couple of times and were beaten up by seniors for this. But at least we got to see a movie before that. It was not easy for us to manage our studies in that setting. Most of our time went in practicing and attending classes. We would study quite late into the night and would get a day off right before the exams for preparation. I approached my studies with the same positive attitude that I had on the cricket field, though the levels of success I achieved in these two areas might not always have been the same. My favorite subject in school was maths, even if it gave me quite a few nightmares. I think those 4 years of college, living in the hostel, really groomed me and prepared me for the world outside. That struggle taught me discipline, made me mentally strong, and prepared me for all situations. It's difficult to shake off the natural discipline that one imbibes in a hostel setting. You end up conditioning your body and mind in a certain way. You carry that discipline throughout your life and teach it to your kids. Towards the end, I did not spend much time at the hostel, since I was getting picked for the junior state teams and then for the junior India teams. Before long, I was playing senior state cricket for Uttar Pradesh. My career had taken off. I even started getting a stipend from the college. Neeraj and I couldn't meet much at the hostel in that period. Recently, maybe a couple of years ago, I took the initiative and started a WhatsApp group only for my hostel friends. We often do group phone calls and speak about the good old, and at times bad old, days. It's a lot of fun. Neeraj and I continue to be close friends, and I meet him often. We are at each other's homes all the time. I rarely bring up my experiences with ragging and bullying unless I think that by sharing them, I can spread some awareness and get people talking about it. It's really a menace that needs to be wiped out. If you are a victim, remember to not feel guilty. Instead, make sure you stand up against it. I am not sure what happened to the majority of those seniors who made life hell for me at the hostel. At times, I do bump into one or two here or there, and they are more than happy to chat. But I always get the feeling that they have conveniently forgotten what they did to us back in those days. It makes me smile every time.